For every loved iPhone, there is also one that is hated by almost everyone. Phones so controversial or disappointing that Apple would rather you forget they ever existed. Starting with one of the most loved iPhones, the original iPhone. Announced on January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walks on stage and says 5 words that change everything. Today, Apple reinvents the phone. The original iPhone wasn't just a phone. It was a statement to every mobile company that had spent decades convincing us that physical keyboards were essential, that styluses were necessary, that smartphones should be complicated. Jobs showed us a device with one button, a screen you could touch with your finger, and suddenly every other phone looked like a relic from the Stone Age. It wasn't perfect. No 3G, no copy and paste, no app store at launch. 2-megapixel camera that took photos that looked like they were shot through a dirty window. But none of that mattered because for the first time, using a phone felt natural and intuitive. The original iPhone created an empire. Everything Apple has done since traces back to that moment when Jobs held up that glass rectangle and changed the world. However, if we want to see Apple take away what they just gave us, we need to fast forward 9 years to September 16, 2016, when Apple said courage. That's the word Apple's Phil Schiller used to justify removing the headphone jack from the iPhone 7. And the internet exploded. Apple removed a feature that's been on phones since iPhones existed, essentially forcing people to use dongles or buy AirPods which weren't even ready at launch and got delayed for months. Apple removed the jack but didn't even have the solution ready immediately. However, to be fair, the iPhone 7 itself was good. Water resistance, dual cameras, solid battery life, and better speakers. But none of that mattered because Apple had just removed the headphone jack and called it progress. People asked the question, what if I want to charge my phone and use wired headphones at the same time? Apple's answer was buy AirPods for $159. People hated it. They made memes about dongles. They complained about needing adapters. They mourned the death of simplicity. Apple didn't care. They'd already counted the AirPods revenue. Looking back, Apple was right. Wireless headphones became the standard. The headphone jack died across the entire industry, but that doesn't change the fact that in 2016, the iPhone 7 became the phone everyone loved to hate. Not because it was bad, but because it represented Apple's willingness to remove features and call it innovation. While the iPhone 7 showed Apple removing features and calling it progress, the iPhone X proved they could still genuinely innovate. Released in November 2017, 10 years after the original iPhone, Apple had a problem. The iPhone was stale. The design hadn't meaningfully changed since 2014. Competitors were shipping bezel-less phones while Apple clung to that home button like it was 2007. Then the iPhone X arrived and reminded everyone why Apple was so good at innovating. All-screen design, OLED display, Face ID that actually worked, gestures that felt so natural you forgot the home button ever existed within hours. Everyone hated it in the marketing images. Then they got the phone and realized it didn't matter because the rest of the screen was so gorgeous. The starting price was $999. People predicted it would fail, but it became one of Apple's best-selling models. The iPhone X was a great phone, but it more importantly showed Apple still knew how to make people want things they didn't know they needed. Every iPhone since has been an evolution of the X. That's how important it was. However, where the iPhone X revolutionized Apple's design language for the next decade, the iPhone 14 showed what happens when innovation stops entirely. Released in September 2022, it wasn't bad, it was just pointless. Similar design as the 13, it had the same chip as the 13 Pro but lacked the zoom lens, and it was the same price as the 13. Apple basically said, here's last year's Pro phone, but we're calling it this year's base model. Customers weren't stupid, they could see what Apple was doing. Why buy the 14 when you could get a 13 for less money, or save a bit more and get the 14 Pro with the new chip and dynamic island? The iPhone 14 occupied this weird middle ground where it made sense for nobody. Too expensive to be a value option, too outdated to be exciting. It's the forgotten iPhone. When people talk about the iPhone 14 generation, they talk about the 14 Pro. The base 14 might as well not exist. Apple got the message. Starting with the iPhone 15, they made sure even the base model felt like a meaningful upgrade.
While the iPhone 14 offered nothing new and felt like a pointless cash grab, the iPhone 17 proved Apple could still make smart decisions. Released on September 19, 2025, Apple had a problem. How do you convince people to buy the base model when the Pro exists? It was simple. Give the base model Pro features. ProMotion 120Hz display, first time ever on a non-Pro iPhone. Always on display, another Pro exclusive, now standard. 48-megapixel dual camera system, 6.3-inch screen, 256GB base storage for $799. Think about that. For $300 less than a Pro, you get 90% of the Pro experience. The only things you're missing are the telephoto lens, the slightly better chip, and some premium materials. The iPhone 17 isn't just loved because it's good, it's loved because it's smart. Apple finally figured out how to make a base iPhone that doesn't feel like a compromise. Reviews called it the best value iPhone ever made. The iPhone 17 became the surprise hit of 2025. Sometimes the best iPhone isn't the most expensive one. Sometimes it's the one that gives you everything you actually need without making you feel like you're missing out. However, where the iPhone 17 gave customers everything they needed for $799, its counterpart, the iPhone Air, asked them to pay more for significantly less. Apple's pitch was interesting. The thinnest iPhone ever, 5.6 millimeters, impossibly light, the future of smartphones. And it was $999. For $999, you were getting a single rear camera, single speaker, mediocre battery life, worse performance than the 17 Pro, eSIM only, and a giant camera bump that made the thin design pointless. But the worst part wasn't the missing features, it was the heat. Because the phone was so thin, there was nowhere for the heat to go, and within a few minutes the phone would start heating up, the screen would dim to protect itself, and the processor would throttle down to the speed of older models just to keep from melting. You were paying $999 for a chip you couldn't even use at full speed. The iPhone Air essentially asked customers to pay more for less, and customers said no. Within 2 months, Apple cut production by 80%. Suppliers shut down production lines. The next generation model got delayed indefinitely. But while the iPhone Air represented Apple's worst instincts, charging premium prices for inferior products, the iPhone 13 Pro showed them at their best. Released in September 2021, this was an iPhone that felt truly complete. The 13 Pro had a ProMotion 120Hz display. After years of Android flagships offering smooth scrolling, Apple caught up and somehow made it better. The camera system, macro photography, cinematic mode, night mode on every lens, this wasn't just a phone camera anymore. This was a professional tool that happened to fit in your pocket. Battery life that actually lasted all day. For the first time in iPhone history, people stopped carrying chargers. The 13 Pro didn't have any deal-breaker compromises. Every previous Pro model had something wrong with it. Too heavy, battery life was too short, cameras were good but not great. But the 13 Pro nailed everything. It was the phone that made people say, I don't need to upgrade for the next 3 years. Even today, used 13 Pros sell for ridiculous prices because people know what they're getting. A phone that is truly loved. However, while the 13 Pro succeeded by giving customers everything they wanted, the iPhone 12 mini failed by giving them what they thought they wanted. Released in November 2020, Apple read the room wrong, completely wrong. For years, a vocal minority had been begging for smaller iPhones. The iPhone SE is too old. Modern phones are too big. Bring back the compact size. Apple listened. They made the iPhone 12 mini with a 5.4-inch display, full flagship specs, everything from the regular iPhone 12, just smaller. Then, nobody bought it. It turns out the people loudly demanding small phones online were a tiny minority. Most customers had voted with their wallets years ago. Bigger is better. Bigger screens, bigger batteries, bigger everything. The iPhone 12 mini had terrible battery life because there's only so much battery you can fit in a small phone. It was harder to type on. The screen felt cramped. Sales were so bad that Apple killed it after just 2 generations. The 13 mini was the last small flagship iPhone. The iPhone 12 mini proved something Apple should have known. Vocal online communities don't represent the mass market. And when it comes to phones, people will always choose bigger batteries and bigger screens over compact size. Whilst the 12 mini proved that vocal online minorities don't represent the mass market, the iPhone 5S proved that sometimes perfection comes in small packages. Released in September 2013, while some were talking about the colorful 5C, Apple quietly released what would become one of the most beloved iPhones ever made. It was the first iPhone with Touch ID, the first fingerprint sensor that actually worked. No more typing passcodes, just touch and unlock. It sounds obvious now, but in 2013, it was revolutionary. The A7 chip, the first 64-bit processor in a smartphone. Apple's competitors scrambled to catch up for years. The iPhone 5S was one of the last iPhone with that perfect compact form factor. 4-inch display, light enough to disappear in your pocket, small enough to use with one hand. People held on to their 5Ss for years because Apple nailed everything about that phone. The size, the speed, the features, the build quality. It wasn't flashy, it didn't try to be revolutionary, and it was just perfect. Now, an iPhone that was anything but beloved was released alongside it, the iPhone 5C. Released in September 2013, Apple's marketing team was excited. Colorful plastic cases, fun colors, a lower price point, a phone that was basically for everyone. Customers took one look and said, "Wait, you want me to pay $549 for a plastic phone?" Apple didn't understand that iPhone customers didn't want fun and colorful. They wanted premium phones. They wanted metal and glass. They wanted to feel like they were holding something special. The iPhone 5C felt cheap because it was cheap. Plastic body when the 5S had aluminum, last year's processor, last year's camera. But the price wasn't actually that much lower. $549 for the 5C versus $649 for the 5S. Apple learned that you can't just slap some colors on inferior hardware and expect people to be grateful. iPhone customers would rather save up for the real thing than settle for the budget version. The 5C was discontinued after just 2 years. Even Apple couldn't spin that as anything but a failure.